This is the Losses Become Gains podcast, the podcast that talks about and normalizes the complexities of grief, life after loss, and all this entails. I'm your host, Tara Accardo. I'm a grief and transformational life coach, and I'm here to serve you guidance, tangible tools, and inspiration to help you cultivate a more meaningful, intentional, and beautiful life. A life where you'll discover gains from your losses and so much more. I'm so grateful you're here. Let's dive right in. One of the things that you mentioned at the beginning of this episode, so this is kind of how I'm tying all of this in here a little bit, but I'd love for you to just speak to this however you'd like, is having a new relationship with those that we've lost. And just how we can incorporate that into our lives, what that looks like, what that means, because I do know certainly in my community and people listening, like, I think that is something people struggle with a lot. It's one of the, I went to a medium, I think a week or two after my mom, this is a whole nother topic, of course, but
oh yeah, for sure. We could have a whole nother show on that.
Exactly. I know this is like part two, but basically the reason I bring this up, and I think it's important to address, is like, I was so desperate to talk to her again. I was so desperate to keep that. And I couldn't wrap my head around, I couldn't imagine, I couldn't fathom not speaking to my mom again. And like my dad, I kind of knew like there was, it's a whole separate death and situation. And I still went to one after he died, but it was a very different vibe. And it was just it was a complex experience. It honestly wasn't, I think I actually went too soon. I think she was like not fully happy with being where she was. Now I'll say that. When I first went to this medium, the medium did a beautiful job. It was just, it was almost like not what I expected. But all this to say, I think just the complexities of how do we cope with, not having this physical connection. We're all very hung up on the physical connection and the physical absence of our loved ones. And how do we even begin trying to maintain that, or I'm going to say recreate that, but like, how do we, develop a new relationship with them, I guess, now that they're gone?
I
There's
mean,
like
that's
50 questions in there.
Question. Okay. And I don't know. I mean, I was just thinking a little bit as you were talking about like the connection with tarot. And I mean, that could be a long conversation.
Yeah.
But just in terms of like, how do we, it's very difficult. And I think like what you said about going to see that medium and you were desperate. I mean, that is a place where a lot of people are, especially early on, very desperate and vulnerable. And that is a place where you can also then be deeply hurt and harmed, by a practitioner that might not have great training or might not have great ethics or whatever. And there are people out there like that. And it can be hard to know how to navigate it when, one, you're in pain and you are that vulnerable, desperate person, and you maybe don't know anything about this stuff at all. Oh gosh, so like it's hard to like pull apart like all the aspects of that question.
I know. We can even like table the tarot part for a moment, and if you want to just speak more to, kind of rediscovering this sort of new relationship, so to speak, however you want to kind of.
Well, I will say this, and I have like I work almost exclusively with traumatically bereaved people and a lot of bereaved parents, and this stuff comes up all the time, and the aspect around mediumship comes up a lot, and not just mediumship, but then like things like signs and dreams and connections, and the other book I wrote that came after the yoga book was the book it's called The Chakras in Grief and Trauma. And so, the chakras are these energy centers that are within our energy system. And then, but this third eye chakra, which is the place where really our connection to the unseen and extrasensory stuff, our psychic ability, but also not just that, but our imaginal space, the place where we imagine anything, where anything exists before it's physical happens in that space, and our connection to all of that possibility that can be there. And that whole chapter about the third eye is basically talks about all of that and the signs and the different ways that we can experience and stories that I've heard and things that have happened to me. But you're right. I mean, we are, as you said, hung up on the physical connection because we live in a physical world.
Yep, I say that all the time.
And honestly, like if you think about it, and this is true for everybody, but when a child dies too, I mean, as a parent, you feed them, you clothe them, you hold them, you all these things that we do that are physical for our children, but also everybody else that we love, that when you reach out and touch them, you can feel them.
Yep.
The smells of these people. When you pick up the phone and you call them and you know that you're going to hear their voice in your physical eardrum, and all of those things, it's really difficult when that's not there to even conceive of how do I have a relationship with somebody if I can't do and have all those things.
Yep.
And it's a huge shift. It really is. And part of it comes of like this learning how to, I would say part of a big part of it comes from learning how to overcome all the things that we are programmed and that society says is true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean, I mean, I could tell you so many, and you could tell me, I'm sure, because you've had them too, these experiences of connection and that knowing that they're there and the signs that come and whatever your things are, we all, most of us have them. I won't say all. I've talked to people and they have a hard time with it, and that's a painful thing too. But I don't care if you have the most beautiful signs and the most beautiful dreams and the most fabulous sessions with the best medium on the planet. None of it replaces those people being here.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, that's all we have now, right? Like we don't have anything other than, but the only reason that any medium can connect with your person is solely because of the love that you have for them. That's what a medium, they're the bridge.
Exactly. Yes.
But you don't need those medium to help you connect. And really good mediums will tell you that.
My medium did tell me. She's literally like half of our session one time, she was just like low-key teaching me how to like connect. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And I do a lot of that with people too, because even if you, and I know some good mediums now. For a long time, people would even say, "Can you give me names?" And I would not, because I didn't know anybody that I would trust. Because I have really bad things that have happened with mediums, and then I have to deal with that in a therapy session. And like probably that person that told them these things never thinks about them again, and it sticks with the person for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
You can say one wrong thing and it then creates pain and trauma for that person that stays with them.
Yes.
So, for a medium, like it is a huge responsibility. And having appropriate ethics and ways that you carefully hold people's broken hearts is so important. Now I do have some good names. And actually, like that's the next thing I'm working on is the next book is I am gonna like teach people like how you can do this yourself. I've talked to so many people with experiences. I've had my own experiences. I've been working on this for a couple of years now. And I'm really excited about that. But doing it yourself is like so important. If you have somebody good, I mean, and another thing a good medium that's ethical will say, you don't want to see somebody more than every 6 months or a year, because you don't want people getting dependent on you. Yes. And also the more you see, so like if say I'm a medium, I could never do that with my clients. I know too much. Like the best thing is to know nothing and have a completely empty slate, right?
Yeah.
So the more you interact with somebody, the more you get to know them and their people, it's hard to really be able to bring the actual messages through.
Yeah.
You don't want to just have like once a year, you have a good medium. Well, I'm going to go talk to my loved ones. No, it's an everyday thing. Yeah. It's just in how we figure out how to do that. And it is not easy. Partially it's in those signs and those connections, but it's also in allowing yourself. So you can't push your grief away and then still have that connection. And because you only grieve because you love so deeply. Grief would not exist without the love. And also, I've not worked with anybody who would trade the love to be rid of the grief.
Yeah.
And they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And a big part of learning how to have this connection and relationship with the person that you love or the people that you love is to learn how to have a relationship with grief as well. Because if you can't learn how to be with your grief, then all you're doing is pushing it away, pushing it away, pushing it away. And I know, and I've heard a lot of times in this business of like, oh, grief keeps them stuck here, or oh, your grief is like this heavy, heavy energy that pulls you down, and you have to get rid of that before you can have this high energy that connect with the love. And that's not true.
Right.
It's not true, because grief does not need to be the enemy. Yes, in the beginning, it is really heavy and feels horrible and weighted down, and as if like you're underneath like the biggest boulder on the planet and you're in a pit of darkness. Yes, I'm not saying that that's not true, because it is true.
Yeah.
But you have to learn how to grow your emotional muscle and learn how to be in the grief without being afraid of it, which is hard to do. Like, I don't say this lightly because it's terrifying.
Yeah.
There were times in the beginning, I'm just like, how am I feeling this? How am I in this? And it's not killing me. I don't know how it's not killing me. Yeah. So, it is a real thing, but it's practice. And so a lot of people don't want to do that part of the practice because that's scary and hard and painful.
Intimidating and overwhelming.
Right.
Probably.
But, and this is my opinion, and you might have people who disagree with me, but I think they have to go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
The beauty in it. I mean, and you can. It's not to say that you don't take breaks from the grief, because you need to. Mm-hmm. That love, learning to focus on the reason the grief is here is because of the love, and focusing on that love and growing that love and being in those places, even when it's painful, are part of how you continue this relationship, because the love never, ever, ever dies. Mm-hmm. It is always there. Yeah. And that relationship is always there. Yeah. And we can grow it and develop it, just like we can when they're here, Yeah. Well, just like in a different way. Yeah. But it does grow and develop. Yeah. The relationship I have with my son now, and this took a lot of work because he died as a baby. Yeah. I don't picture him as a baby anymore. It took me years. He's an 18-year-old now. Wow. And I can see that, and I can feel that, and I know when he's around, and we have conversations. And I had conversations with him when I saw him as a baby, but it was more like this, like telepathic, like understanding in my mind. It was a feeling. Yeah. But now we talk to each other, and it's different. And it took a lot of work and effort and focus, but keeping him around, because some people, it's like you want to avoid the grief. That's avoiding your person at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's, especially in the beginning, it's very hard to separate. Yeah. I can now separate my grief from my relationship with him, but I'm 20 years into this now. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, I'm sure for a listener, maybe they're thinking, oh my God, I can't do this for 20 years. That's not what I mean, but it is an evolution. And in the beginning, like, it's very hard to move through the grief, but it's necessary, even though it's terrifying. And eventually what you actually really do learn is that it is not your enemy. It's just a product of what it's a necessary product because of their absence. Yep. So I don't know if that helps. And we didn't even talk about tarot.
Absolutely does. Well, we can touch on that really quick. I really was curious. And first of all, thank you so much for all of that. I think that's so beautifully said. I know there's so much, this is like probably a very overused phrase in the grief space, but like, grief is love. But it is.
No, but it is.
I know that's so cliche, but that really is
not cliche. There's a lot of cliches, and that is not one of them. That is a fact. Yeah. It just is. It's a fact.
Yeah. That's your
time. You don't grieve anything that is not precious to you.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful point. And when you think about that, I mean, this might be like, okay, this is going to sound like maybe a little controversial what I'm going to say, but if we were to really be honest with ourselves and think about this, when we hear of like, let's say someone we know loses someone, but you didn't know them personally, or, there's other things that we hear of happening, but you're disconnected from it. That happens every single day. And this is like, outside of any, thing going on in the world right now or anything like that. But, you don't grieve that the same way as someone that you knew and loved and had this physical, right? So it's,
no, you don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away from it. I mean, I've had that thought, like on a philosophical and actual true level, I get, and I believe this, it's because it's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
The life of my child, and he is not any more or less valuable than any other child on the planet.
Right.
But none of those children are mine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I can feel compassion and empathy for all kinds. I do it all the time. And the pain of the world, it isn't the same experience that I have with the death of my son. And it's because we're human. Another thing you hear a lot of in grief, or I do, and also in spiritual world and in yoga world, is this idea of non-attachment. I mean, the Buddha said it, like there would be no suffering if we weren't attached. And so a lot of people get this idea, oh, aren't you over it yet? You need to let that go. You need to release these attachments to him or her or them. And that's ridiculous. No, you don't. Attachment makes us human. If we did not attach to other people, especially our children and our parents and our partners, we would all be dead. We would not be here now. The only reason that we are for good or ill, that we are at the top of the food chain, to speak, is not because we have big claws and big teeth or can run really fast. It is because of our brains.
Right.
And our ability to be a community together. And that is essential because of the attachment that we have to each other. And we don't grow and develop if we don't have attachment. Just from a human development perspective, babies must have that, or they will die. They wither and die. They just will if they don't have that love and attachment. And it is crucial for survival. And so when somebody dies, we can't just be like, sure, let's cut that away. It is much more healthy. In grief world, it's called, continued bonds. There's research on it.
I've read about this. It's fascinating.
Right? We must continue to have that connection to continue to grow in our grief. And grief itself is also a developmental process, and it works the same way. In the beginning, when you're first like laid low by your grief and you're just like destroyed, you are having to learn everything all over, like a newborn baby. You can't eat, you can't walk, you don't sleep right, all of these things. And you need the same kinds of things: care and love and support and nurturing. And if you don't get them in grief, you don't grow and develop in your grief, which means having that stronger emotional muscle, being able to integrate your experiences and carry it through life with you. Grief, to me, is not a healing process. You don't need to heal grief. Trauma, we can heal. Your nervous system, you can heal, but it is a learning and a growing process.
Yes.
And if you're not learning and growing in it, then you're not going to get stronger and you're not going to develop.
Yep.
And it's that simple. And it's also not simple at all, because there's a lot to it.
It's actually very complex, but no, I agree so much. And I think I might have said this in a recent podcast episode I recorded or something, but yeah, I mean, so many people are very, I don't want to use the word triggered, but they're very, there's some sensitivity, I will say, around the term healing, and you will never hear "you will be healed from your grief" ever come out of my mouth. That is
me neither.
It's preposterous. But and this healing journey, so to speak, and what that means, I've literally had people kind of say to me, like, the idea of healing is offensive. I don't agree with it, and all of this stuff. And I absolutely understand what they're saying. I do. And especially early on in my grief, I would have been like, healing, that's a cute word. Like, please, But I think, whatever anybody kind of wants to call it, it's what you just touched on is exactly what I just wanted to convey as we're kind of slowly starting to wrap up. Is just like, it is an evolution. It is, I'll say a journey, a transformation. I mean, I guess however you want to sort of call it, it is true what they say. It ebbs and flows over time. It is not linear. It is all of those things that you often hear about grief under the sun. And there was another
someone I was speaking to on the podcast recently, and they were, with the whole like 5 stages and stuff, and we will not get into all of that, but basically, somebody had like said or asked him or something like, have you kind of like gone through the 5 stages of grief? And they were like, yeah, this morning. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, yes, I've never felt more seen in my life. And so that's
so funny.
and everything that so much of what we've talked about today is such a beautiful, just, oh my gosh, I feel like we're just scratching the surface, but just such a beautiful introduction on what that can look like and what that can feel like, and to make it realistic for people, and that, I don't know, just to instill a little bit of hope that like this is all possible. And I love that we've talked about it in such almost like a scientific way a little bit today as well, because for lack of a better term, because I read the book The Grieving Brain, which I recommend to so many people, because I think there is an element that people don't, and when I say people, I mean like, the folks that are, maybe not in therapy, they're very early on in their grief, they don't understand how the brain is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in kind of saying this, but like how the brain is trying to, like, it's rewiring itself. You're trying to like create new
really
predictions. When we're like, let's say we lost, a spouse or a partner or something, and they're sleeping next to you for however many years, and then just like that, okay, you have to relearn so many things. So when you were just what you said just resonated with me so much. Like we're kind of a baby all over again. It kind of made me chuckle a little bit. We're like, we can't eat, we can't sleep. I was like, yep. Like couldn't do any of those things.
You have to learn, and it's impossible. Yeah. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult to do that just on your own.
Yes, it is.
And when people don't have the right support, I mean, I remember this so well. We'll tell really quick. Yeah. It was 8 years in, and I remember this because, and time is irrelevant, but I was facilitating a retreat for traumatically bereaved people. And sometimes we know who's coming, but we go around the circle the first night to kind of get an idea of, okay, what do we have? Who are we dealing with? And this woman was saying that her son was killed in this ATV accident and all these. And I thought for sure, listening to her talk, this must have just happened like a couple of months ago, 8 weeks. It's got to be really fresh. And then she said 8 years. And I specifically remembered it because had been 8 years for me at that point. And I was shocked. I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
But what she also said is nobody would even let her say his name. When she cried or she was upset, they would say, oh, he wouldn't want you to be sad.
Oh, God.
Wanted her to go get on medicine and go get a therapist, but they wouldn't let her talk about it ever. It was like this whole, just shut it down.
Oh my God.
And I'm going to tell you, being with like 40, 50 other traumatically bereaved people, mostly parents, for just 3 days, she was a different person by the end of that thing.
Oh my gosh.
Then she had to go back home and be in this place, which is also hard. It's like part of that learning how to stand on your own 2 feet and say, no, like that's not my truth in my grief. Yep. She wasn't there yet, but just having the ability to see she's not crazy. There's nothing wrong with your grief. You get to talk about your child. We want to hear about him, all of these things. You could see like nobody had like fed or watered or cared or loved or did anything to help her. And she just never grew from that place. Like talk about being stuck, but she never had the chance to grow and develop in it. And it was amazing to me to watch what happened and to realize, and that's why, because nobody helped her to develop. And we live in this culture where they don't want you to develop, they just want you to not be doing this because it's uncomfortable for them and get over it as quickly as possible. And oh my God, don't mention the dead person and stop talking about your grief. And it is really painful for us and for a lot of people who maybe don't have the resources, don't have a good support system, aren't seeking it on their own either because of whatever, I mean, their personality or it's not available to them or for whatever reason. They start internalizing those messages too and thinking there must be something wrong with me. What is wrong with me? And then you have shame on top of the grief. And then that creates more isolation and then continuing to not grow from where you are. And then probably also not growing your relationship with your person because how can you?
Literally, that's what I was going to ask. Like, how is that right?
So, yeah. So I'm really like, I'm so grateful that you're here, right? And there are other people like you. When my child died, I mean, social media can be good or bad. There wasn't social. I was lucky that I had the support that I did have in my support group and in the Miss Foundation, but there was nothing else. Like there was
if you didn't have that, like,
and I mean, 20 years is a long time, but also it's not a long time. And so much has changed. And not even in 20 years, I've got to say, like probably 15, maybe 12 years is when we've seen like this big shift. And grief not being stuck in a closet as much. And we're not all the way there, but it's getting there because of people like you, right? Because now there's so many more resources, because people have, now this sense of I'm going to go find what I need. And there's more places to look for it now.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Right. Normalizing it and almost warmly embracing it as a part of our day-to-day
and it
life.
is a human experience.
Because it is. Yeah. I always say we can allow it to overcome and overwhelm us, but that is ultimately a choice. I don't know how I feel about that, but after maybe not like early on, like, for a while I was like, no, this doesn't feel like a choice. But
well, there's a lot that doesn't feel like any kind of choice.
Yeah.
But then also, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what's available to somebody. There's so much in a person's life and in their psyche and in their personality and in their history of trauma and intergenerational trauma and how their family has been dealing with things. There's a lot. I mean, but what is good is that there's a lot more help and resources now than there ever have been. It's not perfect. And even in my field of therapy, not the Reiki and the mediumship, but it's hard to find. It's hard to find therapists and practitioners who really know how to work with this. Like even I did a show earlier today where we talked about this new diagnosis of prolonged grief disorder, which I find offensive, ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And if you read the criteria, makes no sense. And you have a bunch of people who have clearly never lived through it, who are writing down, here's the criteria for this disorder now, which they're going to
how dare you
with medicine, which is also offensive. But I mean, that's also another show. But it's hard to find the help and support, which is why a lot of times places like this, where people can find you and lots of other voices that can help them like learn new things and hear new things and things that resonate with them, because you might not find somebody who is going to work well with you. I've talked to a lot of people who come to me after they've already been to multiple therapists, and there are good therapists. I'm not saying that there aren't, and they're, well-trained ones, but they're not that many.
And or they weren't the right fit maybe for that person. I mean, that's a whole nother layer on top of all of this. If you're going to find someone to work with, then, you might want to find somebody who has experienced child loss, if that's what you're looking for, or parent loss, if you're looking
you don't have to have personality. I mean, I know this now. You do not have to have had a child die to help somebody who's had a child die. I know now. I would never have believed it before when it happened to me. In fact, like that was one of the reasons I didn't go to a therapist, because I was really scared that somebody would try to like push the stages or make me move on or in any way criticize how I was grieving or whatever. And I was really angry, and it would have made me even more angry. But, that was me at the time. There are more options now, but you have to be discerning. And not everybody is, because there's loads of people in my profession who are terrified of traumatic grief. People get into this work because they want to help people, right? And when you can't fix this for somebody, it is very hard to just sit there and hold space with them and be there with them in it.
Yeah, because that's really sometimes there is no
all you can do.
Yeah, it is.
And it's hard for people, and it's a learned skill, and not everybody's learning it. Hopefully, more people will start learning it. I mean,
special kind of person.
It can be learned. But I just, I'm grateful that you're here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That absolutely goes both ways. And I do really quick want to touch on the tarot actually before we go. I'm so determined. I haven't left that yet.
Okay.
In case anyone else is curious, but I just want to say, again, just the balance of the way that we've talked about this today, I really think is going to be so helpful for people just from so many different levels, even if it's
finding a new way to be, because you're not the same.
Right.
And finding a new ways to navigate the world is crucial.
Yep. And things that resonate with you. And as always, I say spark joy, getting that from Marie Kondo, and, just finding some semblance of what makes us feel fulfilled and vibrant and all of the beautiful things after we experience.
And that can take a while, but it can be done.
It can.
Yeah, it can be done.
Yeah. And we can actually have a little fun along the way, and we can learn a thing or two.
Yeah, lots of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I learned so much today. I mean, some of it I was aware of, some of it I was like, oh my gosh, tell me more. I almost wish we had more time. But I know you mentioned your first 2 books. So I would love for you to just tell everybody really quick, like if you want to just repeat your book names. I know there's a third I don't think we touched on, but those, and then just where everyone can find you.
Yeah. There's 3 books. So the first one I actually wrote because of a kid that I worked with when I was working in schools, and his grandfathers both died, and there was really nothing out there on autism and grief. And so I wrote him a little story, and then that little story turned into the first book, which is called Finding Your Own Way to Grieve, a creative activity workbook for kids and teens on the autism spectrum is that one. Okay. And then the Yoga for Grief and Loss book was next. And then from that book grew the Chakras and Grief and Trauma. Mm-hmm. And I'm working on this next book that has everything to do with growing and being in relationship with our beloved dead. That's happening. And anything about me you can really find on my website. All those books are anywhere you get books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can go to your bookstore and ask them to order it for you, and they will. They're published through Singing Dragon, and so they're not self-published, so you can get them all over the place. And then my website is karlahelbert.com, and it's Karla with a K. Right. And you can find out about Reiki there. I mean, you can contact me, any of those things. But yeah, that's any of that stuff that you like, or you want to know more. And you can, as I said, always just like reach out, email me, and I will answer.
Amazing. Yes, this will all be linked in the show notes, of course, but thank you so much for everything. We covered a lot of topics, more than I even anticipated, but I don't mean that in a bad way. That was, so impactful. I have no doubt anyone listening here can take away just some absolute nuggets of gold from what we talked about today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So yeah, thank you so much for your experience, your guidance, your expertise on all of these amazing and very, very important topics. Grief and beyond. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes. Grief, life, and everything in between, and all the things. Yeah. So thank you so much, Karla. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you're taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, more coping tools, ways to work with me, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your stories, and supporting you however I can. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.